The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried bacon. It was nearly empty, just the way Wyatt Cole liked it. He sat alone in the far corner, facing the entrance, his back to the wall like always. Habit, reflex, survival. He stirred his coffee, slowly, watching the waitress chat with the cook behind the counter. Her name tag said Jules, but she reminded him of someone from a life long gone. Maybe someone from Fallujah, or maybe it was Kandahar. The faces all blurred together after a while. Wyatt wasn't wearing his uniform. Those days were behind him, at least officially. He wore jeans, boots, and a plain black hoodie. On the outside, he looked like just another drifter passing through town. That's probably why the cops hadn't hesitated. They came in fast, 3 of them, maybe 4. Wyatt's senses flared the moment the first boot crossed the threshold. You didn't survive a dozen tours in the SEALs by missing that kind of detail. "Hands where I can see 'em," one of the officers shouted, voice high with the kind of fear that only comes from not knowing what you're actually dealing with. Wyatt turned slowly, calmly, measured. His expression gave nothing away, though he could already feel the adrenaline beginning to uncoil in his veins. The officers had their weapons drawn. One had his finger hovering on the trigger guard of his Glock, like he thought he was about to reenact a scene from Bad Boys. He raised his hands. "I'm not armed," he said, flatly. His voice was gravel. They didn't listen. Or maybe they did, but the badge outweighed logic. They swarmed. One shoved him forward while another kicked his legs apart and snapped on cuffs. "You're under arrest," one cop barked. "Suspicion of assault and battery. You fit the description." Wyatt didn't resist. There was no point. The diner's windows had turned into a theater. Curious onlookers pressed against the glass, recording with phones and murmuring. Jules watched with wide eyes. Her mouth parted slightly as if she was about to say something, but couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Wyatt was marched out into the cold morning light. 3 hours earlier, the truck broke down just outside of Sweetwater, Texas. Wyatt had coaxed the old diesel Ford as far as he could, but it coughed, sputtered, and finally died on the shoulder of the highway. The gauge read half a tank, but the smell told him the fuel filter was shot. He tried calling for a tow, but the signal out here was garbage. He sighed, grabbed his rucksack, and began walking toward the town's only gas station, a ragged place, with a dusty convenience store and a single grumpy mechanic. That was when he first noticed the man, late 20s, tweaked out on something stronger than caffeine, shouting at a woman in the alley behind the store. At first, Wyatt thought it was just a junkie throwing a tantrum, but then he heard the girl cry out and his instincts took over. He didn't even think, just moved. The guy had her cornered, blood on her lip. Wyatt stepped in fast, grabbed the man by the back of the collar, and threw him into a stack of crates. "I'm not looking for trouble," Wyatt muttered as the guy scrambled up, but trouble was looking for him. Back to present. They tossed him into a holding cell at the Sweetwater Police Department. The cuffs had left raw marks on his wrists. No one had read him his rights. No one had asked for his side of the story. They saw a quiet drifter in dusty clothes and assumed the worst. "Name?" the booking officer asked from behind a scratched glass pane. Wyatt stared back at him. "Name?" the officer repeated, annoyed. "Wyatt Cole?" The officer typed it in and frowned. "You military?" Wyatt nodded once. "Retired." That made the cop pause, but only for a moment. "Well, Wyatt Cole, you're in some deep—" The door slammed open. Everyone in the precinct turned. A man stepped in, tall and imposing, his frame square as a concrete bunker. The lines on his face had been earned on battlefields across 3 continents. His uniform was crisp. Stars gleamed on each shoulder. A 4-star general, General Marcus Harlan. The room went dead silent. Even the chief of police stood up from his desk. Harlan didn't waste time. He strode past the open-mouthed officers like Moses parting the Red Sea. "Where is he?" the general demanded. Sir." "Who?" the desk sergeant stammered. "Chief. Petty Officer Wyatt Cole." Holding cell 3, but—" "Open it. Now." The cell door clicked open within seconds. Wyatt didn't even look up as Harlan entered. He was sitting on the bench, hands resting on his knees. "Took you long enough," he muttered. Harlan chuckled. Didn't know you were planning to rescue civilians on your day off. Wyatt finally glanced up. Old habits die hard. Harlan's expression sobered. This shouldn't have happened. Wyatt stood. You think? The general turned to the cops. I want to speak with the chief. Alone. 2 hours later, the police issued a public apology. The man Wyatt had subdued in the alley had 4 warrants and a sealed record for domestic violence. The woman was pressing charges. Jules, the diner waitress, was giving her statement too, said she saw the whole thing. Harlan and Wyatt sat on a bench outside the station. You didn't have to come, Wyatt said quietly. I did, Harlan replied. What happened here was wrong. Wyatt didn't answer. He was looking at the sunset. I've got an offer, Harlan continued. There's a project I'm building, off the books, special task force. We could use a man with your skill set. Wyatt raised an eyebrow. A clean-up crew? More like a fire team. Black Ops, joint task force. No uniforms, no press. Just people who get the job done. Wyatt looked at his bruised wrists. Then at the small-town badge on the wall behind the station doors. You trying to make up for what happened here? He asked. Harlan stood. No. I'm giving you something bigger. A chance to make things right, in a world that's very much still broken. Wyatt looked up. I'll think about it. End of chapter 1. 5,000 words continued in next message. Continuing next message due to length. Chapter 1. Continued. Misjudged. Later that night, Wyatt checked into a modest motel on the edge of town. The room was clean enough, with a faded blue bedspread and a buzzing mini-fridge. He sat on the edge of the bed, removed his boots, and stared at the wall for a long time. His rucksack lay in the corner, packed with the few possessions he still owned: a utility knife, a tattered field journal, and a service medal he hadn't looked at in years. He opened the journal and thumbed through a few entries, some written during his deployment in Iraq, others after his time in Djibouti. The last page was blank. He pulled a pen from the spine and scribbled something. Even at home, you're never off mission. He set the journal aside, stood and stretched. His ribs still ached from the scuffle. The cuffs had left bruises that were already purpling across his wrists. He checked the lock on the motel door twice before finally lying down. Sleep didn't come easily. Meanwhile, the general's office, Fort Braddock. General Marcus Harlan sat behind his mahogany desk, rereading the incident report. The printout was thin, but the implications were massive. He'd known Wyatt Cole for nearly 15 years, long before Cole had become one of the Navy's most elite snipers. The man had taken out high-value targets across multiple continents and saved more lives than most civilians could ever comprehend. And now he'd been manhandled like a petty criminal by a group of over-eager local cops. Harlan rubbed his temples. What the hell is happening to this country, he muttered. A knock came at the door. Enter, he said sharply. A young woman in uniform stepped in, Captain Jordan Reyes, his chief operations liaison. You wanted the files on the Shepherd Protocol, she said, handing him a thick manila folder. He opened it. Classified inserts, operations plans, target dossiers. Cole's in? He said he'll think about it. Harlan smirked. That's, yes, he just doesn't want to admit it yet. She hesitated. You sure about bringing him in after what happened? I'm especially sure because of what happened, Harlan said, looking her dead in the eye. Wyatt Cole has been protecting this country in silence for 2 decades, and today that silence got him humiliated. No medals, no headlines, just cuffs. He leaned back in his chair. Men like that, we owe them more than thanks. We owe them purpose. The next morning, Wyatt sat alone again, this time not in a diner, but under an old elm tree by the outskirts of town. The dew still clung to the grass and the air was quiet. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it ring twice before answering. Cole, this is Harlan. You forget something? You agreed to think about my offer. I'm checking. In. Wyatt looked down at his hands. The bruises were still there. I thought about it, he said. And? I'll do it. There was a pause on the other end, a quiet satisfaction. I'll send a car. Don't bother. I'll be waiting. Wyatt ended the call and looked off into the horizon. He didn't know exactly where the mission would lead, or if he even trusted the government he once bled for. But there was one thing he was sure of. He was still a soldier, and soldiers don't stop fighting just because the battlefield changes.